My name is Merrill Dubrow, President and CEO of MARC Research. I'm a 35-year veteran of the research and insights community and have really exciting news to share. We are launching a new podcast called On the MARC. On the MARC is focusing on executives and thought leaders in the world sharing their insights, strategies, and personal experiences. I promise this podcast will be filled with tough, pointed questions with real, insightful, and emotional answers. Today's guest is entrepreneurial, philanthropist, industry legend, and my best friend, Steve Schlesinger, CEO of Schlesinger Associates. Steve, welcome to On the MARC podcast.
Thank you, Merrill. Good to be here and excited to launch this series with you.
All right, let's just get into this right away. So there you are. You're, a 10, 12-year-old. You're chasing around Debbie and Howard and Judy in your mom's house. She's involved in the research industry. She's probably recruiting. What are you thinking about besides trying to catch Howard and obviously get away from Judy and Debbie? What are you thinking about? Is this your home for 30 years? Is this the industry you thought you'd end up in?
Absolutely not. My mom had started in the research industry, I think, when I was about 3 or 4 years old. And, we grew up, sort of listening to her make phone calls and talk about products and interviews that she was doing with executives. But it surely wasn't a career that I had envisioned for myself.
That's great. July. This past year, you're coming up on a 6-month anniversary of something that was probably one of the most important decisions in your business life, if not in your life, with selling and partnering with Gage Capital in July, right? That was about 6 months ago, Steve?
Correct.
Take us through that. I think the listeners would be really interested in, were they the highest bidder? Why did you choose Gage Capital? What were some of the learnings along the way? Because I know a number of the listeners will be really wanting some takeaways as they go through the process that you and your team went through.
Sure. So I think the best way to sort of give everyone a sort of an idea of what happened is to sort of take it back prior to the transaction and really the process by which we decided to go down this path. I think we had several decades of really successful growth, growing the business up from, when I got involved, which was probably, a few $100,000 a year of revenue to, north of $100 million in revenue. And we sat back and we really thought about what the opportunity for us was moving forward. And, did we want to continue on a path of 5 to 8 to 10% growth a year, or did we want to look at, potentially really growing a lot faster and what the company could ultimately look like with an infusion of serious capital? So we spent a lot of time as a senior leadership group talking about this, really thinking about what the opportunities were. And at the end of the day, what we decided was we had built a really, really strong platform, a really strong foundation, great leadership team, great team overall. We had accumulated a lot of assets over the years, both organically and through acquisition. And we felt that we were in a place where we really could sort of take off and really grow the business in a more accelerated fashion. So we hired a great investment banker called Black Arch Partners and a man named Johnny Conklin. He helped shepherd us through the process of sort of putting our wares together, really thinking about what the company looked like, the story that had been the prior 50-some years, and then the story moving forward. And this is a great sort of process to go through. It's exhausting. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. But at the end, what it does is it gives you a really good read on your business, both all the positives around it, but as well a good look at the blemishes too. Things that maybe you need to do better, things that maybe are areas or challenges for the business, but then also what the greater opportunities are. And then we started the process of seeking partners. We spoke to, I'd say it was probably around 40 private equity as well as strategic partners. In the end, the goal really focused on private equity and what I would call financial or capital partners. We had probably somewhere around 14 offers for the business, and we were never selling 100%. We were going to sell a large portion of it and continue to maintain ownership and involvement in the business. And then really what it came down to was finding the right partner who believed in our strategy and story and as well could add value to what we were doing. And that's ultimately, why we selected Gage.
When you went through this process, how emotional was this for you individually? Because your mom started the company, 50 some odd years ago. How hard was that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, a process that you have to go through. I mean, for me personally, it was really getting comfortable with the idea of, putting the legacy of Schlesinger Group in the hands of other people as well as myself. It was, having comfort and trust in whoever we selected as a partner that, we can maintain sort of the culture that we had created as well as the strategic vision for the business. Even to the extent of, how it would feel like for me to, in essence, have people to answer to that might be different than what had existed prior, and what that would feel like. And then not just myself, but my partner, Mike, but also, the rest of my senior leadership team, as well as the greater company, what it would feel like for all of us. One of the things I think that we realized as we went through the process is that, although, people hear stories about private equity or financial partners and what that might feel like, our belief was that, nobody would push us harder than we push ourselves. And we do have, very high sort of demands and goals that we set every year. And we felt that, even if there was another partner involved or in essence, a majority holder of the business that would, in theory, be our boss, what would that feel like? We felt that it wouldn't feel any different than how much we push ourselves. And, so far to this day, I don't think it has.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. What do you think Sarah would tell you? I know she's looking down and has a beautiful, big smile on her face, but what do you think she would say?
I think even, throughout the years when we were going through some great growth spurts and she maybe was a little bit less engaged in the business, but obviously still alive, she would say things like, can you believe this is where the business is today? Can you believe that this is how much it's grown? Did you ever think it was going to get like this? And, I'd say when I started back in, I think it was 1985, I would have never thought that the business would have grown to this extent. It's been a great run. And when I think about all the years that I've been involved, which is, 30 plus, I always say that, it didn't happen in one shot. It's been, the steady year after year of growth and opportunities to sort of, accelerate the business. And, I think she'd say the same thing if she were alive today, which is, wow, look at this. Can you imagine that this started in the kitchen in our house in Woodbridge? And, she always had an amazing amount of pride for what we did and what we accomplished. And I think she'd feel the same way today. And, and like you said, be smiling in the way that she did.
That's great. So let's go in a different direction. You've done how many acquisitions now to date? Not the ones that are in the pipeline. We might get to that again, but is it 14, 15, 18? What's the number, Steve?
Yeah, so I think, we did 11 acquisitions post or pre-Gage, and then post-Gage we've completed 2, so that would make 13 total. And then, like you said, we have a few in the pipeline that will hopefully happen over the next few months.
Let me just ask you, out of those, and then I'll make a comment and ask you a follow-up question. Out of those, in your mind, how many of them have been successful? So let's go with a base of 13, the 11 pre and the 2 post. 13. How many have been really successful to this point?
Yeah, so I'd say that I'm gonna talk about it as 11 plus 2. So the original 11, 10 were successful, varying degrees of success. One was what I would call not successful, but the reality is it wasn't truly a failure. It really just didn't achieve the results that we wanted, but in the end, it's worked out okay. So I wouldn't call it really a failure. I would just call it not what we had set out to achieve. The other two that are the newer transactions, I believe that both of them will be successful. All indications so far are that they'll be successful. But when you acquire a business and it's only been a few months, it's really hard to determine the level of success at this point. It takes a good solid year or two before you really get a feel for how it's going to turn out.
Right. So let's stay with the 11 and get rid of the other two post Gage. If we stay with that 11, our good old buddy Sandy Schwartz has always taught us and spoke about this, that most acquisitions don't work. That he always said that the best acquisition is one, frankly, that you don't do. And he said, and I believe, that about 70% of them just don't work. Your percentages would suggest you're almost the exact opposite. 9 out of 10, 10 out of 11 have that success. Why do you think that is? And is there I don't want to say a secret sauce, Steve, but is there an integration plan that you think other companies, because when I was at Elric and Lavich, we bought a bunch of companies. They weren't integrated well. When I was at Harris Interactive, we bought a lot of companies, and the integration plan they thought was 2 or 3 weeks was never enough time, and we never really benefited on the ROI and on the merger or acquisition of those companies. But it seems like you're doing things a lot different than most companies. Any ideas on what that is, and can you just kind of comment a little bit about the plan that you have?
Sure. So, I mean, acquisitions are challenging. I mean, they're challenging to find, they're challenging to close, and then surely they're challenging to integrate and create success off of. And a lot of that is because there's a lot of moving pieces to it, and you're typically buying something that has existed for a while, has its own culture, has its own processes and people, and the question is, how does that all fit into the overall puzzle that you're creating and you're building? So I think our approach has always been about embracing the companies that we take in. It's never about forcing things on them that don't make sense. It's actually also around taking the best in class or the best in breed. So when we acquire a business, we're looking for them to add to our overall core business also, not just what they do, but also best practices, systems, processes, technology, and so on. So, we try to create a very inclusive integration. I also think that we have been very, very good at being sensitive to the culture and the nuances of the businesses that we have acquired, really thinking about who those people are, since we are in very much of a people-oriented business or industry. We're really thinking about, how they will feel about this integration, how they will feel about becoming part of maybe a bigger company. We think about culturally, where they're located. We've bought many organizations in Europe, and we really try to understand, that country and the way that they do business. So there's a high sensitivity to all of that. And then the other piece that I think we've done really well with is the time it takes. And by that, what I mean is not about we've done really well in doing it fast, but more about we've done really well at being patient and working through that process in a way that makes sense, not just for our core business, but also for the business that we're acquiring, and then obviously the team as well as the clients that we're servicing. So we're really trying to make sense of it and really take our time to do it well, to not have a falling out with staff members, with clients. continue to service the business right, continue to maintain quality, and then look for opportunities to create advantages, whether that's marketing advantages, efficiency advantages, client service advantages, moving capabilities across our entire organization. And all of that has been very effective. And I think that that's ultimately what's made us successful.
That's great. I think there's a lot of takeaways there for the listeners there for sure. All right, Steve, what's the worst business mistake you ever made?
Let's see. So, I think, when I look at that one acquisition that wasn't very successful, the learning there was that we fell in love with a business that we wanted to acquire so badly that we sort of looked past the blemishes in the business, and we didn't really dig deep enough to really understand the impact that they could have. It was one of our earlier acquisitions, and I think every acquisition we've learned something. In this case, the learning was a bit more painful in the sense of, how that business did not provide what we thought it was going to provide to us. So that was definitely a learning and a mistake. We've had some, great hires through the years, and we've had some, hires that we made that weren't good fits, and we've learned from those, those experiences. And I tend to look at these things, and people talk about this all the time, and I actually believe it's true, which is that failures are not failures; they're just learnings. So when something doesn't work right, you actually learn from it, and then you obviously look to not make that same mistake again, or you look to take that learning and apply it to whatever decision making you're doing. So I think it's things like that. I think we did a reorganization about 4 years ago that was in essence a failure. The funny part about it is that reorganization is really very much how we are organized today. The problem was when we went through that about 4 years ago, or maybe it's actually 5 years ago, we weren't prepared to do it then. We didn't have the team or the technology to do what we wanted to do. And the thinking was right, but we just didn't have the ability to execute as we wanted to. So, we took a step back, had to retrench and, go forward. And actually over time, we've moved more and more towards that model, and it actually is working incredibly well for us. So I think we were onto the right thing. We just weren't prepared to do it at that moment in time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, obviously you look back at a lot of your decisions, analyze those, probably have terrific self-awareness, and it helps you move yourself and the business forward, which is great. What would you say, Steve? I'm going to take you back to the 80s. What would you say to your younger self? What would Steve Schlesinger today say to Steve Schlesinger in 1985 to a 20-year-old?
I think the things that I've learned that have been most valuable to me, and I do a lot of mentoring and advising to startup businesses as well as, folks who are earlier in their careers than I am today. And I'd say the things that I definitely have learned are, one, you have to take risks, and, risks come in lots of different, forms and shapes and flavors. And, I think if you can take some risk along the way, the tendency is you get some reward. So I think that's, one piece of advice. I think the other is that, surround yourself with people that you could trust, but even more so people who can advise you well. I think that there's no question I've learned so much through the years talking to folks like yourself and other colleagues, but then even people outside of our industry who are in business, and all those conversations have helped mold me and helped me to think maybe more clearly or more productively. And I think that's a real important piece, whether you use advisors or mentors or board structure. I think all those things are very helpful. And I know a lot of peer-to-peer groups like the Vistages and the YPOs of the world, YEOs of the world are incredibly useful for many people. I encourage that. I obviously encourage engagement and involvement in the industry. That has been one of the sweetest parts of my career, or the people I've met through serving on boards or, being at conferences and being a part of the industry. I think the more that you can appreciate what everybody's got going on, and the more that you hear and you see, the better off you are, and the more capable I think you are of having and finding success. So those are the things I think I would tell a younger Steve Schlesinger. And then, the other thing I would also just say is that, as we were talking about just before, failures, I think mistakes and failures and steps forwards and step backwards are pretty normal. And those shouldn't be, viewed as anything that should discourage a person. I think if anything, it makes you more equipped to move forward and, take all of those experiences as part of your evolution and your growth to become hopefully a more successful professional.
Yeah, I think you should definitely be applauded for all the work that you give, not just on the old MRA board, but obviously your alma mater, Vermont. The time that you give there is just really something special with the Joseph School and Jim Bryson, what he started years ago. And I know you're on a lot of boards of in the hospital board, obviously, on the East Coast, which is great. And it's keep it up. I mean, it's really impressive that you are able to accomplish, so much and give so much of your, frankly, you don't have a lot of free time. I mean, you're a father, you're a grandfather, you're a husband, you're a brother. You have so many things. You're running an unbelievable company, and you're on all these boards, and you mentor so many kids who are starting out. If I was in front of you, I'd give you a pat on the back, a hug, and it's really, really impressive. Let's talk a little bit about the insights industry and, what bothers you about the insights industry? What would you like to see changed in the next year or two within that insights industry?
I don't know if anything bothers me per se, but I think that, we're at a place now, and we probably have been for a series of years, where, the insights world is becoming more and more important. Information is, surely a relevant currency, and, clients, brands, users, it's becoming more and more important in their daily lives. And I think we do have an opportunity to continue to step up our game and, do more or have a bigger seat at the table. And I think we need to continue to push for that. I also think we're at a place in time where there's sort of a convergence going on around information and how people think about information. So, how we might have thought about research in the past, research is one component of information, especially the research that we all do, which tends to be primary, I think, or custom research. I think that this idea of bringing together custom and secondary and data in general, and then who all the users are of that information, which is not just, marketing now, but it's strategy, it's business development, it's user experience, customer experience. There's a lot of different components and players now. And I think that there's an opportunity to bring more of these folks together under the same umbrella and really create a more dynamic insights industry. And I really hope that that's the way it goes. And then, of course, without question, you have to add to that it's not isolated to just the U.S., it's global. And we should always be thinking about it in global context, which means that, if the industry associations, if the industry as a whole can start looking at things across all geographies, across all different types of businesses, across all different types of users, I think we'll have a much more dynamic forum to share information, learn, evolve, and, service our clients really well.
So pick a number, Steve, 2, 3, or 4.
3, right in the middle.
3, there you go. So right now, all the listeners are going through a lot of planning and goal setting for 2020. So I've seen the future, and congratulations, and we're talking in about 365 days. About 2020 was a special year for Schlesinger Associates. Hip, hip, hooray. Nice job. What would be the 3 goals that you have that you'd like to accomplish in 2020 over the next 365 days? You don't have to defend them. What are the 3 goals that you have?
So, of course, one is integration of businesses, because, we've made a couple acquisitions, we've got a few more happening, and that'll be really critical for us. Two is continue to look to organically grow our business, whether that's client acquisition, deeper with clients, and or sort of new lines of business. And we have all of those in play, and we're very interested in that. And then the last piece for me is just I always look at personal growth. What am I doing for my business, for the industry? Am I making an impact, and how am I making an impact? And then, probably as important as those criteria are, am I enjoying it? Making sure I'm having fun doing what I'm doing. I work really hard, but I love what I do. And, I want to continue to love what I do and make sure I am making a difference. And if those things happen, I'll have a very successful 2020.
That's great. All right, last question, Steve. I know there'll be a lot of listeners C-level, and I want you to complete this question. Fill in the blanks. The old cryptic quote from years ago, and the Mad Libs from years ago. If you're selling your business and it's blank, please contact me. What would you fill in there? Because there's going to be a lot of folks that are thinking about some type of exit strategy for themselves, and I know they would love to hear from you or get your perspective, or at least analyze the business to see if it's a good fit for your company to purchase them. What are you looking for that some of the listeners might contact you about?
I'm looking for healthy businesses that are looking to take the next step in their evolution. So we tend to look for growth opportunities. So there are businesses that have actually maybe they've plateaued a little bit and need a little bit of sort of extra juice to get them moving along. Maybe they're businesses that can utilize a bigger sort of home like ours is in terms of commercial development, business development, and or even just support. If they've got a technology or a platform that maybe needs to be married into something else, like a recruitment engine like ours, or physical facilities or geography, feet on the ground like we have. So those are all the things that we're looking for, and and we're happy to talk to really anybody. And by the way, just for the listeners, for me, I'm always happy to help people. So I'm happy to have the conversation, and if I could advise or even just suggest things to people, I'm always happy to do that too. So it doesn't always have to be about me being the right partner. It may be just by making some recommendations or even just sharing some experiences.
That's great, Steve. You're always so giving with your time. And on behalf of all the listeners, myself, the entire industry, which is much better for you being in it and being such a contributor. My name is Merrill Dubrow, President and CEO of MARC Research, and you've been listening to our podcast, On the Mark. Steve, I can't thank you enough for your time today. Thanks again.
My pleasure. Great talking to you.